My name is Gaurav and I teach Indian economy here at GS Core, which you also know as IS Core. And we have done one more video on economic survey earlier. And if you have not seen it, please go and check it out as well. The survey was about special and unique terms introduced in economic survey. Whereas in this session, we are going to discuss the common terms that are used in economic survey. While there is no limit to the common terms can be 100. For example, fiscal deficit can be a common term. Okay, for example, the reverse repo can also be a common term, but it's not possible to cover all the common terms in that way because that would cover all the common terms, basic terms in the economics. So that would go beyond the scope of such an exercise that we are trying to do. We are trying to discuss some of the common terms that survey uses. It does not try to explain them because these are now fairly commonly used in survey. However, they're still relatively not so common. Okay, try to understand that while specialized terms, unique terms are explained in the survey itself, because they're either used for the first time or they're used obscurely in somewhere in other context. So those are explained by the survey, but these are used just in the common discussion and the explanation part, and they do not even bother to explain them now because they've been using it for a long time. However, these are still relatively specialized terms. Many students still have confusion with them. So while students should not have confusion with the terms like repo, reverse repo, like fiscal deficit, monetized deficit, etc. So those terms which you absolutely need to understand, which are the common definition of the terms in the economics, if you just have to understand the subject, I'm not going to discuss those common terms which are required to understand the subject, but these terms not necessary to understand the subject, but are still used. Okay, so these are common, but relatively lesser known, relatively lesser understood terms by the students. Now, let us look at these 20 terms one by one. I've divided them into three categories. First of all, terms related to the fiscal policy, then terms related to monetary policy, and then there are certain other terms. So let us look at them one by one. The first very commonly used term is crowding out and crowding in. Crowding out was the original term, but then over time, since there was a term called crowding out, we also started using crowding in. What is crowding out? Crowding out is a situation when too much crowd, too much pressure on a system removes some participants outside the system. That is the general definition. That is the general meaning of the term itself. Now, what is its core economic meaning? The core economic meaning is the financial markets are pressurized by government or come into pressure because of excessive government borrowing, and because of that, many private players are pushed out of the market. How does it happen? Let us understand. Let us say economy is already doing well. Private sector is already quite hopeful, is very much interested in investment. So private sector is already investing. There is a lot of demand for funds in the financial market. Now, in such a situation, when private sector is already investing, there is demand for funds in the market. If at the same time, government will also try to invest and try to borrow through the market, then what will happen? Then, because of too much demand, see, supply has not changed. Supply is still the same. Demand from the private sector is already there. Okay? Demand from government increases suddenly. What will happen? The overall demand will increase. And if demand increases, we know from microeconomics, the prices increase. In the financial market, what is our price? In the financial market for funds, the price is the interest rate. Okay, in a financial market, when demand for funds increases, the cost of funds increases, that is the interest rate. And if interest rate increases, if taking a loan become more expensive, then obviously some people will no longer invest, some people will move out of market. For them, now their investment is not worthwhile. Okay, so what is happening here? Government entered the system with a good intention, perhaps. It wanted to invest, it wanted to use some liquidity from financial system. However, ultimately what happened? The government borrowing reduced private borrowing. Overall investment is not increasing. This situation is called crowding out. It is not always that government borrowing will create crowding out. It happens when already private sector has good demand for funds, and at the same time government also tries to borrow a lot and invest. So it is advised that government should not borrow too much. Government should try to cut its spending when private sector is doing well, when private sector is already doing investments. Okay, when economy is going through a positive, good business cycle, government should cut its fiscal deficit. That is the broader idea. Now, crowding in and crowding out, these are factored in our FRBM, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. So government should keep its fiscal deficit relatively lower if economy is in a good, positive business cycle. Whereas if economy is in negative business cycle, if economy is not doing well, then opposite is suggested, that government should take more loan. If private sector is not creating demand, then the entry of government there will create more confidence, will create more demand, and that is good for the economy. So when economy is booming, cut your deficits. When economy is facing a depression, a recession, increase your borrowing. This is the suggestion for the government. And this is because in borrowing during positive business cycle creates crowding out. It removes private sector investments to some extent. And during the recession, it creates crowding in. It attracts more private sector investment. Just one more explanation for this, how crowding in happens. For example, economy is under a slowdown. For example, the COVID is a good situation to explain. Because of COVID situation, companies are right now not planning to invest. Companies have postponed their plans. Okay, for example, a company wanted to open more factories because it was facing more and more demand. Now it is considering that right now there is too much uncertainty. We do not even know whether, even after opening the plant, whether people will be able to work or not. So this is a doubt in everybody's mind. And doubt is the biggest enemy of economics. Uncertainty is the biggest enemy of economic growth. So if people have doubt in their mind, what will happen? They will not invest, they will wait. In such a situation, if government invests, if government creates more demand for products, what will happen? Because government is creating this more demand, private sector suddenly will have more sales. And encouraged by these higher sales, some of the industries will also start investing. So government investment will attract private sector investment as well. But in a depressed market. In a already booming market, it will remove private sector investment. So this is a very important concept that we need to understand. So crowding in and crowding out. I hope this is now clear. Next is asset monetization. It is a very easy and short term to explain relatively. What is asset monetization? Asset monetization is the new name that government has given to disinvestment. As simple as that. What we used to call as disinvestment earlier, now government is arguing disinvestment is a bad word. What do you mean by investment? Investment means you are putting your money into new production facilities. This is exactly what investment means in economics. In financial market, investment is very different. I'm putting my money in stock market, I'm putting my money in gold, I'm putting my money in real estate. In financial markets, we call that investment. In economics, we call it savings. When you are putting your money in stock market, you are buying gold, etc., you are saving, you are not investing. In core economics, what is investment? Investment is the money that is actually spent towards creating more production facility, opening more factories, offices, plants. Okay, so that is considered investment. Now, by that logic, disinvestment is when you are shutting down factories, when you are closing out plants. This is not happening when we are disinvesting. That is why government is saying this disinvestment is a very bad term, and we have discontinued using this term now. In more and more cases, we are using asset monetization. Okay, so it was a very popular term, so it will take a long time for this term to go out of public usage, but we have stopped or we have reduced the usage of the term disinvestment. Sometimes we use, even government uses, because the context is not exactly clear sometimes. So, because disinvestment as a term was very, very popular. So, disinvestment, the way the term looks, the way it should mean is that we are shutting down plants, we are reducing the investment. Whereas what we are doing when we are disinvesting, government is selling the assets, private sector is buying those assets. Those assets are not getting wasted in the process. Clear? So that is not disinvestment. What is happening? Somebody had assets, he monetized his assets. What is monetization? Encashing. Encashing an asset. You sold that asset, you made money for that, and someone else now has the asset. That is asset monetization. So this investment is now called asset monetization. And not just this investment, asset monetization is a broad term. Okay. Anybody has any asset, a company has a factory, it sells it, that is also asset monetization. You have any asset, you sell it, that is asset monetization, simply. Now government has started using this term for disinvestment, preferably in more and more cases. Next term is off-budget financing. What is off-budget financing? Off-budget financing is financing of a scheme or financing of an expenditure that is not recorded in budget. Okay? Spending outside the budget. This is not a good practice. Okay, that is why economic survey highlighted its problems. Economic survey highlighted that now there are few cases where government is doing off-budget financing. This is not a good practice because this in a way hides data. This in a way manipulates data. Okay, although government is providing the detail, it is not hiding. But since nobody looks at other data, people look at the budgetary data. It does not matter whether you provided some extra sheets with the budget, because if we look at the budget, everything should be there. Why do we remove something out of the budget? That was the concern. But then government had its own argument. So economic survey was arguing, okay, in one or two cases, it can be possibility. We are not saying it should not happen, but it should not happen frequently. So off-budget financing happens sometimes. So sometimes there may be a very big expenditure which is not of a permanent nature and which is not even a typical expenditure under budget, okay, which is not even a technical spending by government, but government has to indulge in that. So government may try to cover that expenditure through some special bonds which are not mentioned in the budget, but we are providing a separate document for them, or we are maintaining separate data for them. This is done so that public do not panic, so that we do not send rogue signal. So for example, in India, when banks required recapitalization because our capital adequacy ratio was increased as per the Basel III norms. So when as per Basel III norms we increased our capital adequacy ratio, banks required more capital. government being promoter of public sector banks or being owner of these nationalized and public sector banks was supposed to provide that capital to the banks. Okay. Now, this amount was not a small amount. This was almost 2 lakh crore rupees that was required by the public sector banks. And government, being owner of the banks, was supposed to provide it. Now, this is not your regular nature expenditure. This is not even a typical government expenditure. This was once in a while, one of a kind expenditure. So government said if we include it in the budget, it will just push our fiscal deficit way beyond where it should be. And it will send wrong signal to the foreign investors, it will send wrong signals to the credit agencies, and it will unnecessarily create panic. So we create a special purpose vehicle and we do it outside. So this is an example of off-budget accounting in India. So central government did it in the case of recapitalization of banks. Then state governments have also done it in the case of Uday, Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, for example. And they've done it in many other cases also. So it was largely the state governments which were doing it. And that is why it was highlighted as a bad policy. Center has also done it. So yes, as emergency, as one of a kind, it can be done, but you should not be doing it regularly. And definitely not your reoccurring expenses, not your rare expenses, but which are typical government expenses. Those should not be passed out from the budget or hidden out from the budget. So that is off-budget accounting concept. The next term is fiscal consolidation. This is also a term which is used very frequently. So what is fiscal consolidation? Fiscal consolidation is a type of fiscal policy or is a type of budgeting which aims at cutting the deficit. Aims to reduce deficit. Okay? Aims to cut expenses. Particularly leakages, wasteful expenses, etc. Unnecessary expenses. So when deficit is high and we are trying to cut it, we are trying to control it, that type of fiscal policy or that type of exercise is called fiscal consolidation. When we try to cut deficit, our first objective is to look at expenses. Looking at taxes is only after when we have controlled the expenses, usually. Because increasing the taxes sends a bad signal politically. Politically, it's a bad policy. So political parties avoid doing it in the first instance. What they try to do, they try to cut the expenses first of all. Sorry. So when they try to cut the expenses, what kind of expenses first of all? Particularly the leakages, wasteful expenses. This should anyways be cut whether we are doing fiscal consolidation or not. And then certain unnecessary expenses. So government tries to identify that are there some expenses which are poorly designed and hence the expenses are going out to people who should not receive them. That is the leakage. Leakage doesn't mean corruption here. When we talk about policy leakages, that means policy is poorly designed. Benefits are not going to the targeted section, they are going to some other people who do not deserve or do not need the benefits. That is a policy leakage actually. So are there leakages? Do we have some wasteful expenses? We are making the expense but not making any ground impact with that. Okay, or we are making the expense largely on our machinery, not reaching on ground. And then certain unnecessary expenses. So we first of all try to highlight them and try to cut them. If this addresses the problem, good, and the job is done. If it doesn't happen through that, then we try to cut some of the other expenses as well. If still it can't be controlled, then we look at the taxes. Can we increase some of the taxes? Can we collect more taxes? So all of this is called fiscal consolidation. And consolidation is a word that is otherwise also used in business. So for example, a common suggestion to the businesses is grow, consolidate. That first of all grow, increase your size, but then consolidate. Then try to stabilize. Okay, constant growth. Let us say no stop growth is never good. It is usually said in the business. Okay, because when you are constantly growing, then it is possible that things may go out of control. Things may become so unstable that suddenly you will collapse even while growing. Okay, so it's better to stop for a while, to take a breath. Okay, when you're running fast, better to stop for a while, take a breath, drink some water, let your body, all the indicators to come to a normal number, and then maybe you can start running again. Constantly running is not a good idea for everyone. So companies should follow these strategies. So from there, the word consolidation is also used in the budgeting. Nonetheless, let's look at the next term, which is an interesting term, fiscal drag. Okay, fiscal drag can happen in few ways, but I will discuss the most common way, most commonly occurring examples of fiscal drag. For example, in an economy, there is constant inflation. Inflation, all of us know, means price rise. So in an economy, prices are rising continuously. And because of price rise, what will happen? Let us say in 2-3 years, incomes will also increase by same effect. Because if you have to spend more, for example, on average, prices are increasing by 10%. Then people will also ask in their offices that our income should at least increase by 10%. Otherwise, we are not even able to maintain our current lifestyle. Forget about getting appraisals. At least 10% is required to maintain the current lifestyle. So usually what happens in many countries, first of all, particularly if you're a government employee, then your income is linked to the inflation. You automatically get the compensation for inflation, or your income automatically adjusts to the inflation. So in that case, you do not even have to argue with anyone. Your income is constantly adjusting to the inflation. So when prices rise, incomes also increase, not the real income, but nominal. Okay, nominal income increases. Monetary, financial income is increasing, not the real income. Real income means that in actual purchasing power, there is no difference. Since nominal income increases, many people will come in higher tax slabs. Okay, so for example, your income was 8 lakh. Okay, for 3 years constantly there was inflation and your income, nominal income, has increased up to 11 lakh. Meanwhile, prices have also increased by 25%. So in reality, there is no change in your status, but your financial income is now 11 lakh. And let us say up to 10 lakh rupees income, the tax was 10%. Whereas from 10 to 20, the tax is 20%. Now you come under higher tax slab. Okay, now because of increase in nominal income, many people may come under higher tax slab. And now they have to pay higher taxes and their real income will actually decrease. This will lead to real income decrease. I will start from the beginning, not that much difficult. First of all, we have inflation for a long period, because of which prices have risen. Meanwhile, incomes have also adjusted to the rising prices. As a result, nominal income, The financial income has increased, but since prices have also increased, the real income has not increased. But since taxes are on nominal income, taxes are not on real income. And because nominal income has increased, many people will come under higher tax slabs. Because they are in higher tax slabs, now they have to pay higher taxes. As a result, their real income will decrease. Their nominal and real, both the incomes will decrease because of higher taxes. And as your real income decreases, your demand decreases. And this decrease of demand is called fiscal drag. Okay? This decrease of demand is called fiscal drag. Fiscal drag happens in countries which have very progressive tax slabs, where taxes increase a lot in each slab, and there are several slabs. So a lot of people will change their slab in that case. So fiscal drag happens when there is inflation for a long time and there is decrease in real demand because of that. So that is fiscal drag, and it happens due to progressive taxation. Now, in order to escape fiscal drag, countries have to revise their tax slabs from time to time if they have inflation. So that was the point. Next term is quantitative easing. It's a very easy term. In fact, it is the term on which I will spend least amount of time because this is so straightforward. So what is quantitative easing? The quantitative easing is simply a situation where government or RBI or central bank, in case of India it is RBI, in some countries it is not the central bank but some other authority. Okay, so central bank is increasing the quantity of money in economy. In other way, money supply increases. Money supply increase is called quantitative easing. Clear? And when quantitative easing happens, okay, first of all, how do quantitative easing will happen? How money supply will increase? You can lower the policy rates, you can purchase the bonds and push more cash into economy. So through open market operation, you can cut the reserve ratios, the statutory liquidity ratio and CRR, the cash reserve ratio. So you can do all of this in order to increase the quantity. And when quantity increases, then more borrowing happens, more cash in the economy, low interest rate, so more investment will happen. So quantitative easing is done to promote growth through encouraging investments. But then there is a negative side, that this also leads to increase in inflation. That is why we have to do a balancing. Okay, otherwise if there is no negative effect, in permanently doing the quantitative easing, we can't do it because there is a limit to it. Afterwards, it will lead to massive inflation. So this is quantitative easing. And a monetary policy which does quantitative easing is called accommodative. is called accommodative monetary policy. Okay, so next term was basically just the same thing, and even the next term is also the same thing. This is also called expansionary. What is expanding here? The money supply. Accommodative monetary policy or expansionary monetary policy is the same thing. Okay, so both of these, in both of these, quantitative easing is happening. So this is all about these three terms, not really too much to explain. You just need to know that there are certain terms like this. What is the opposite of quantitative easing? The opposite of quantitative easing is quantitative hardening or quantitative tightening. There are two terms which we use as opposite. Hardening, the exact antonym of the easy, or tightening. Okay, that is opposite of the expansion. Hard. Quantitative easing, quantitative tightening, or when we follow quantitative tightening, this is also called dear monetary policy. Dear monetary policy. Okay. So I have not written this term here, but this is also associated. So there are 4 or 5 terms that can be done in a bunch. The next term is liquidity. Many students have confusion with the term liquidity. What exactly is this liquidity? Let us try to understand. Liquidity has two meanings, and the meaning would be easily be clear from the context itself. So liquidity, when we use for a financial asset, for a financial or non-financial asset, or for any asset simply, assets can be financial or non-financial. So liquidity of an asset is simply the ease with which it can be monetized. Ease and speed. Liquidity is the ease or the speed with which any asset can be monetized. Now, what is the meaning of all of this? For example, you have gold. Now, gold you can sell very easily to any shop in your city, any jewelry shop, because all the jewelry shops purchases gold from public. So gold is very liquid. The day you want to sell it, you can sell it because there are many buyers and it is mobile. You can take it from one place to another and it has a daily rate. You do not have to argue with anyone for the price because a daily price of the gold is there for everyone to see. So it has a very high liquidity. So if you purchase gold, you know that has high liquidity. In contrast, when you purchase land, land does not has high liquidity. Sometimes you can sell it very easily, but that is not always. First of all, land does not have a fixed price. There is no daily price which is announced by some authorities or some organizations for land. Then land is not uniform. What is the price of land in the next colony to you can be very different from your colony. Okay, so for example, in my society, the price of land is 5 times the price of just the next society. Because maybe my society has more security and more greenery. But anyways, the point is, even the adjacent land can have a different price. So there is no fixed price. And then it is not mobile. You cannot take it to other places to sell. So it is relatively less liquid. Okay, so the ease and the speed with which you can monetize land is relatively poor. Sometimes you can sell it very quickly, but that is usually not the case. Whereas gold can always be sold at a certain price and very quickly. Now your financial assets are even more. Those were the example of physical asset. Financial assets are even more liquid because their prices are announced every day or they are changing every second on the stock exchanges. So you can sell your shares anytime. If you have shares as your assets are stocks, company stocks. You can sell like this. Okay? Flash of a second. So that is one of the most liquid asset, bond. You can sell now on the stock exchanges as well, very, very quickly. Again, flash of a second. So that was the point. So liquidity in the context of a financial asset is this. But when we use liquidity for economy, that liquidity in the economy, when we use the liquidity term independently, then it means the money supply. Okay, in some context, it can also mean money supply. When we say liquidity easing situation, that more liquidity is injected into the system. Now, in these two examples, by liquidity we mean money supply. So it can have two meanings depending upon the context. And I hope you can very easily make out the context. One context would always be with respect to an asset. Otherwise, if it is independently used, then it means money supply. This was the reason these terms create confusion sometimes for students. And the reason why I wanted to cover it, because otherwise this is not a term that I would be covering otherwise. There are many such terms which I'm not discussing here. Helicopter money. What is helicopter money? Helicopter money is when government transfers cash in people's account, or whatever way government give cash to public, to everyone or to a large number. Okay, everyone or a large section. Okay, it can be different way: transfer cash in account, giving direct cash in hand. Okay, and there can be various mechanisms for doing so, but helicopter money is this, that from helicopter you are dropping money everywhere. Everybody gets money in this system. What is the point of helicopter money? Why we are discussing this term? The helicopter money we are discussing here, see, because it is a policy used sometimes during the recession. Certain economists, particularly the monetarist, okay, there are certain economists who are called monetarist, monetary economics. So they argue in favor of helicopter money. How does it work? Very briefly, let me tell you. The argument is, when prices are decreasing, when recession is due to lack of demand and fall in prices. How do such recession happen? For example, for some reason there is fall in prices, small fall in prices. For some reason, let us say it happens because of some event, that there is decrease in the prices. Now, because there is decrease in the prices, what companies will do, they will try to reduce either wages of their worker, or they will try to cost cut. Obviously, when prices are reducing, companies will try to cut the cost. When companies will try to cut the cost, they will generate less income for their employees. When they will generate less income for their employees, we have to understand our employees are also our consumers. Who works at my factory will also be using everybody else's products and my products as well. Similarly, the person who works in another factory, he also consumes everybody's product. If this is a economy-wide phenomena, if everybody cuts incomes, then what will happen? Demand will decrease further. Demand will decrease. So automatically we know from our demand and supply system, if supply is more, demand is less, prices will further crash. So it is a vicious cycle in which constantly, because of falling prices, demand is falling. Sorry, because of falling demand, prices are falling. Because of falling prices, the factory owners, the employers, they are also doing more cost cutting, lesser income are generated, and further demand is reduced, further prices are reduced. This is a vicious cycle. Now, how do you break this vicious cycle? One of the policy suggestion is, because recession is due to fall in prices, what we can do, we can increase the prices, create inflation. Solution to this situation is create inflation. So print more money. Usually we say do not print money and distribute because this is highly inflationary, this is bad. But when your problem is price crash, then you can create inflation. Some inflation will do well here. You can do well with some inflation here. So create inflation, print more money, give it to public. First of all, public will be happy. It is a good political decision. Secondly, this will create inflation. Public will create more demand with this more money. This will push prices. Increase prices, encourage employers to increase production in the next cycle. They will hire more people. Okay, they will increase production. This will generate more incomes. And we will break the vicious cycle. Okay, helicopter money can break vicious cycle. So helicopter money is in news because for several years it is argued by policymakers in India. USA is doing it for last 2 years. Do you know? For example, my brother is receiving $12,000 for last 2 years, almost $12,000. Okay, so he's American taxpayer and lives there for a long time, and because of the COVID situation, government opted in favor of helicopter money, that give people some money. Okay, so something like $4,400 per person they decided. So something like that he is receiving, $4,400 per person per year. Now he, $4,400, his wife another $4,400, and his son another $4,400, or maybe for son it is half. So, but overall something like $12,000. I do not exactly remember the breakup, but that much money. This is a big amount of money actually. You can maintain your kitchen throughout the year for $12,000 in USA. So government has given this much so that people do not fall under the poverty line because of COVID, so that people's income do not crash. So this idea was adopted by Donald Trump. But this idea became so popular with public, this was a good idea in a way, and since US can pull it off, we can't pull it off, we do not have that much resources. US could pull it off. Now even the Biden administration, which was initially critical of it, has continued it. Okay, if we do not know whether we are going to get this year or not, but for the last 2 years, every American taxpayer, the criteria was you should be taxpayer, okay, or you should not necessarily payer, but you should be filing tax returns, or you are a US citizen. My brother is not US citizen, he is a taxpayer, so on that criteria he got, he is a green card holder, not citizen yet. So citizens were eligible. Apart from that, those who are not citizen, then the criteria was you should be a taxpayer. You should be filing your tax returns, may not be necessarily payer. So that was the point. So helicopter money, I've told you the example and I've also explained how does it work. So this is also a policy option. In India also it was advocated by some economists to deal with the recession in 2019 and then also the COVID situation. And do you know, India is also adopting it to some extent. We have made some cash transfers under different schemes. Okay, we have increased such cash transfers as well. PM Kisan is also an example of helicopter money actually. If we create UBI, in case we do, then that would also be an example of helicopter money actually. But helicopter money is useful when you have falling prices, when you have recession because of that. If you do not have recession because of that, then helicopter money is not good. In USA, that was happening. In India, this is not happening. In India, we already have inflation. That is why helicopter money is not suggested. So, to a very small extent, to some sections, we created this in 2019. Now, let us look at the next term, that is haircut or spread. Haircut or spread is used in the context of loan creation by banks or other financial institutions. Loan creation. Okay. Whenever a bank or a financial institution will give loan to you, it will ask for a collateral. Collateral is more popularly known as amanat or zamanat, girvi rakhna. That is, okay, so what is your security? What is your collateral? What is the security for the bank? In case you are unable to repay, what is the security for the bank? For example, we take a car loan. The car is the security for the bank. For example, we take a home loan. The home is the security for the bank. Okay? So, but if it is not a loan to finance something, then we have to provide collateral. So, in that context, we use the haircut or the spread. First, I will explain spread, then I will come to haircut. So, let us say someone wants to take a loan of 1 crore rupees. He goes to bank and submit papers that this is my property. This property is worth 1 crore rupees and I will give this as security. Please give me 1 crore rupee loan. Bank will say no, it can't happen. Your property is worth 1 crore rupees today. Tomorrow, its value may decrease. We do not know. These markets are always fluctuating. It can increase also. We are not saying it will only fall. But what if it fall? We will not be able to recover our money. A property worth 1 crore rupees cannot be used as a security for a loan of 1 crore. We can only give a loan of 70 lakh rupees against a property of 1 crore rupee. That could be the bank's argument. Because there are uncertainties obviously. So this difference between the market value of the asset and its collateral value is the spread. Okay. Market value of asset minus its collateral is called spread. It is the spread. It is the buffer of the risk for the bank. Buffer to cover the risk for the bank. So, it is the spread in which bank can operate. Bank can cover its risk. So, traditionally it has been called spread. Clear? Now, this spread varies as per the nature of the asset. For example, somebody has gold. He wants to keep gold as collateral. Then spread will be very small. Okay. For example, if you have gold of 1 crore rupees and you are ready to give it to bank to finance loan, then this you can get a loan perhaps worth 90 lakh rupees, 95 lakh rupees, 90 lakh rupees. Okay, because generally the value of gold doesn't crash drastically and it's not that much. In contrast, you have a government bond of 1 crore rupees maturity value. The spread will be very, very small. For example, the spread could be, you would be able to get a loan worth 98 lakh rupees for a bond worth 1 crore rupees. So again, that is going to give you a good value. So If asset is fixed value, if asset has high liquidity and low risk, then the spread would be very small. Okay, so I hope it is clear. When you want a loan, you need to provide collateral. The collateral's value will not be taken as per its assets today's market value. So the difference between assets today's market value and how much bank is considering to be its collateral value, this is the spread. Now the point is, over time, spread has become very thin. Over time, this spread has become very thin. The difference between the loan amount and the market value of the collateral is decreasing. Okay, banks are becoming increasingly competitive. Banks are becoming increasingly risk-taking. Okay? Banks are becoming more competitive and risk-taking. So this spread has become very thin. It has become so thin that we now sometimes call it haircut. You get a haircut. Will it decrease your height? How much it will decrease your value or your height? Not significantly. So that is what banks do today. They are ready to give you loan almost at the market value, almost 90-95% of the asset value. So the cut is so small that they now call it haircut. That technically it didn't made any difference. Okay, so that is the haircut. I hope it is clear. Okay, so now let us look at the next term, and this is policy rate corridor. Again, a very small explanation for this. Policy rate corridor is basically the difference between the reverse repo rate and MSF, marginal standing facility rate. Okay, so this difference is the policy rate corridor. The difference between the lowest policy rate and the highest policy rate, this is called corridor. Okay, so I mean, there is no actual explanation required for this. This is a technical thing. Okay, so reverse repo, the rate at which RBI can borrow from the bank. Okay, what RBI has to pay for its loans. That is the cost to the RBI. That is the lowest possible interest rate. Okay, what RBI has to pay should be the lowest interest rate. So this is what RBI pays, the lowest rate in the country. Then above reverse repo, we have the repo. Repo is what banks pay to the RBI, okay, for a specific type of agreement, repurchase or repossession agreement. Repo is a short form for repossession. And we also call it repurchase because repurchase is more easily understood. I'm not going to explain repo here, but the point is, repo is definitely higher than reverse repo. So repo is when banks take loan from RBI, but this is a collateral loan. Then after that comes bank rate. Bank rate is a non-collateral loan. You do not have to provide securities. You do not have to provide government bonds to RBI. So this is the general rate at which banks can borrow from RBI. Banks can take loan from RBI. So obviously RBI will charge more when it will give loan. Okay, for example, when bank give loan to you, they charge you more compared to how much deposit rate they give you. When you put money in bank, they give you less interest. But when you take a loan from bank, they charge you high interest. Because the difference between the deposit rate and the lending rate is the corridor in which bank has to cover up all its cost. Okay. So bank has to cover its staff cost, its building cost, maintenance cost, so many other costs. It has to maintain its profitability. It has to cover the risk for the NPA. Everything is covered within that difference. For bank, that is its operational corridor. The difference between the deposit rate and the lending rate. For RBI, there is a similar difference between reverse repo rate, then there is repo, above repo there is bank rate. And above bank rate or equal to bank rate is MSF. It is not necessary that MSF has to be higher, but MSF is the highest rate of interest because MSF is given on the overnight loans. So usually this is the highest rate of interest, policy rate in the country. So there are 4 policy rates. The difference between the lowest and the highest is called policy rate corridor. Difference or this policy rate corridors creates some profits for the RBI, and it is from these profits that RBI also makes transfer to the government as well. So RBI makes profit because of presence of this corridor. So that is all on the policy corridor or policy rate corridor. Next is over leveraged or under leveraged. What is this over or under leveraged? This is also a very relatively small and easy definition, easy thing to explain. So what is this? The idea is over leveraged when you have taken too much loans. Taken too much or too many loans or debt compared to income. If it is an individual, then it is income. If it is a company, it is revenue, profit, turnover. There are various parameters how we measure. Okay, when your loan are high compared to your income, revenue, profit or turnover. When the debt to revenue or just a minute. When the debt to revenue or profit or turnover ratio, this is high, we call it over leveraged. If this is equal to high, then over leveraged. If this is low, this is under leveraged. That means you still have scope of taking more loans. Compared to your profits, which are very high or which are high, you've taken very less loans. You can very easily pay more loans if you want. If you want to open more factory. If you are under leveraged, it is very easy for you to take loan and open a factory. If you are over leveraged, then there is problem. Best example in recent years is Reliance. It was argued Reliance was over leveraged. Reliance has taken a lot of loans. Its debt ratio was considered high. What Reliance did in order to address its over leveraged situation? It sold a lot of its shares. For example, it sold 20% of its share to a Saudi company, a very well-known international giant called Aramco. So Reliance sold 20% of the shares to this Aramco in exchange of a lot of cash. That cash Reliance used to repay its loans. In that way, Reliance got rid of a lot of debt. And Aramco anyways is a partner. The money Aramco gave is not a loan. Aramco has become a partner in your company. So that is definitely not part of debt. So by selling your shares, what you did, you offloaded your debt. You removed your debt. So that is to address the problem of over leveraged balance sheet. So that is what we understand by over leveraged and under leveraged. Sometimes entire country can be called over leveraged and under leveraged. For example, India is called under leveraged because our international borrowings are very less compared to our GDP, compared to our forex reserves, or by different parameters. Okay, our international debts are very, very less. When we compare it to some other companies, for example, countries, for example, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, these are over leveraged. They've taken too many foreign loans compared to their GDP or their turnover. So that is how even for countries we can use this term. I hope it is clear. Over and under leveraged. Next is pent up demand. What is pent up demand? Demand that suddenly increases but remains high thereafter. Demand that suddenly increases but remains high. That means the increase in demand was not an accident. This is a permanent shift in the pattern. This is a permanent behavioral change. Or people were not aware that this product exists. As soon as they got aware, they started using it more and more. A good example is green tea. Before 2005, green tea is existing for centuries. Chinese, Japanese are drinking it for such a long time. But in many other countries, green tea was not so popular. Then many blogs, websites, newspapers, magazines, they started writing articles on green tea, that green tea is good for health, green tea is this, green tea is that. What ultimately happened? Many more people started using green tea. And I'm not saying it does not have benefit, it just doesn't taste well, at least for me. And I'm not a good example to follow when it comes to the weight maintenance. Okay, so nonetheless, the point is, I can do well with some green tea, obviously, but I do not like the taste. And that was not the point. The point was green tea had pent up demand. There was a need for such a product, and as soon as people recognize there is such product, then they increase their demand, and it has remained high after that because that product was needed. Clear? So this is called pent up demand. Product may exist for a long time, but it may not have that much awareness, or people do not know about it, or in some cases behavioral pattern may change completely. Okay, technology may exist for a long time, but people now have started using it. The point is, once demand increases, then it should become permanent. It should remain like that for a very long time. A good example in the context of India, where actually we use pent up demand, is stock market investment. In India, stock market is existing for a long time and people have been investing in it. But of late, for past 2-3 years, we are seeing constant increase in the stock market. Why is this happening? Sometimes this even confuses analysts, confuses the top experts, confuses top economists. Why? Because they are not able to understand what is happening. The reason is that there was pent up demand. Why there was pent up demand for stocks? The reason is banks have decreased interest rate massively. Now the FDs, they hardly give you 5%, less than 5% interest today. Whereas at a point, fixed deposits used to give you 9%, 10%. I'm not talking about my father's generation. I'm talking about myself. Even just 7 years ago or 8 years ago, I had an FD which was giving me 9.7% interest. I think in 2013 itself, I had an FD which was giving me 9.7. That much high interest rates were there. Today, I'm not going to get half of that. Because banks are not giving you any interest nowadays, not giving you significant interest, more and more people are not interested in bank FDs. They're putting their money increasingly in other assets. And in that context, stock markets have become their preference. And this is a permanent preference shift now from banks to stock market. So increase in mutual fund demand, for example, is massive. The demand for mutual funds has increased and is permanently staying in high. So that's the point. There was pent up demand. That is how we explain. Next two terms are interrelated: adverse selection and moral hazard. See, adverse selection happens when there is an agreement and one party in the agreement does not provide complete information. There is asymmetric information. Asymmetric means on both the sides the information is not same. The customer has more information about himself but he is not revealing the information. The company has the information which customer is providing to them, and on that basis they are selling them insurance policies, they are giving them loans. So this situation leads to adverse selection, and this happens when there is inadequate information with one party, asymmetric information. In what context do we use in economy? In what context do we use it in survey? It is used because it was adverse selection which led to increase in NPAs and failure of many government policies. People lie for benefits. This is not something hidden. This is well known, and this leads to adverse selection. Okay, so people while taking loan do not provide full information to the bank, full disclosure to the bank. So for example, we have created a central database, a unified database. Okay, banks are advised to tally in the central database. Okay, now in fact this is a properly systematic thing. I'm talking about 15 years ago this used to happen. Now you take a loan, your CIBIL score will be checked. No financial institution or a bank will give you loan without checking your CIBIL score. Whenever you take a loan, even when you take a small loan from your credit card, for example, I want to purchase a cell phone on a 3 months EMI, even that will be registered on my CIBIL. Do you know? So everything, any loan that I take now is registered to my CIBIL account. And through this CIBIL, any bank can track how many loans do I have, how I performed on my old loans. But this system was not there earlier. People didn't used to disclose their credit history. They didn't used to disclose their other loans. And it was done in good faith by the bank. Bank used to assume that, okay, they would do all the checks, but it was very difficult to get out all the information. So this created adverse selection problems. CIBIL has reduced adverse selection in banking. And similarly, we have moral hazard. What is a moral hazard? Moral hazard is used in context of different policies and sometimes in context of insurance. Moral hazard is when you are covered for the risk, when the cost of your risk is borne by someone else, you will engage in risky behavior which you otherwise would not. Let us say, what happens in this case is that, for example, you have taken theft insurance, proper comprehensive theft insurance for your company. Because you have a theft insurance, you will not invest in very high security system. You will not hire too many bodyguards or too many security guards. Let us say there is a jewelry store. Jewelry store has almost 3 crore rupees worth of jewelry in the store usually. And it has taken an insurance policy which is covering for 5 crore rupees. Obviously, it will not pay 5 crore, it will pay how much loss is there. But up to 5 crore rupees loss, it is covering. Now, because you are insured against theft, against all kind of risk, let us say it is a comprehensive policy, then you will cut down your investment in other areas. You will cut down your expenditure on, let us say you already have a high security system, obviously you will not remove it. But if you did not have it, then you will not purchase it either. So you will not invest to upgrade your security systems. You will not invest to hire more security guards. Let us say, even if you have insurance, still you will keep some security guards, 1 or 2. But if you do not have insurance, you will have higher number of security guards. You will have more security. You will be more careful. So people become careless. This is the point, people become careless once they understand that their risk is covered by someone else. So this is a problem, and this problem is called moral hazard. Okay, so for example, now we have understood from data now data tells you everything. People who have zero debt insurance compared to the people who do not have zero debt insurance, zero debt is zero depreciation insurance. In zero depreciation insurance, company pay you everything, entire cost is covered. Whereas in the other kind of insurance, non-zero debt insurance, you also have to pay a part of the cost. Okay, company pay covers only proportion of the cost. Because zero debt insurance is popular and more people are taking it, we have seen through data, people who take zero debt also claim far more compared to people who do not take zero debt insurance. And it is also assumed that people now drive more carelessly because there are so many good insurance covers in India. Okay, written to invoice, zero debt, the key cover, everything is covered nowadays. You can get car's full value in case of absolute damage. So all of this is promoting ruthless driving also in a way. Okay, so that is moral hazard. Now GVA. GVA should not be a term with which students confuse, but actually this is a term on which I get maximum queries from students. That is why I wanted to include it, and GVA is used everywhere in the survey. What is GVA? GVA is same as GDP, but GVA is used in the case of units of the economy. It can be used for a sector. It can be used for a company also. It can be used for an industry also. What is the difference between sector, company and industry? Company, you understand, is a specific firm. Okay? And let me give you an example. This will make things amply clear. Okay? Let's say Infosys. Infosys is a company. Okay? Infosys has its GVA, gross value addition. How much value this Infosys is adding into the system. But Infosys is part of an IT industry. So IT industry also has its GVA, gross value addition. Infosys is a firm which is part of an industry, which is IT industry, and IT industry is part of the service sector. So for any of the units of the economy, we can use the term GVA. But when we talk about the GVA for entire economy, when we total up the GVA of everything in the economy, then what we get is GDP. Then we call it GDP. Okay? There is technically no difference between the GVA and GDP actually. You can also call the GVA of a state as state's GDP. You can call it GVA of agriculture as agricultural GDP. Sometimes the terminology is also used. So in that context. So students sometimes get confused because, sir, what is GVA? It is used for companies, it is used for industry, it is used for sector, it is used for state. We get confused. What exactly is it? So in that context, I just wanted to discuss it. Next term is also very straightforward. Stressed assets. Okay, now it is a wider term that we use in order to identify how many of the bank's loans have been under trouble. Okay, so stressed assets is a more wider category that we now use. Stressed assets are NPA, non-performing assets, assets on which for more than 90 days we are not receiving the interest or the capital or both. So NPAs themselves can include a particular list. Okay, so that is also there. So within NPA category we have few of them. Then apart from NPA, what else do we include in the stressed assets? I will talk about the NPA categories also. Let me first complete this. So what else is there? Apart from NPA, what we include in stressed assets is the restructured assets. Restructured assets are those assets on which we give some discount to the customer on the terms of the agreement, terms of the loan. So somebody lost job, is unable to repay loan, he approaches bank, he's a genuine difficulty, he can't work. Let us say he had an accident, life-changing condition, something like that, and is unable to find job, unable to work. Request the bank, sir, I've taken 15-year home loan, I've already paid the loan for 8 years. You can see no single EMI is missed. So I'm a bona fide customer, I'm a good customer, but now I have a genuine difficulty. Please give me some kind of relaxation. I can't pay this much EMI. So bank may genuinely consider this person's request. So what bank can do here? Bank can give this person additional 5 years to repay loan. That, okay, right now you are paying 25,000 rupees per month. At present, your loan was pending for 7 years. What you can do? You pay 15,000 rupees, but you pay over next 12 years. Some interest they may cut down. They give longer duration to repay so that this person is able to repay loan. Okay, such assets are called restructured assets. Okay, so these are also part of the stressed assets. Plus return of assets. Assets which are removed of the balance sheet. NPA is what is already in the balance sheet. Restructured assets are also in the balance sheet. But there are some return of assets. These return of assets are removed from the balance sheet because now the recovery of these loans is less likely. We can no longer show them in our balance sheet as assets. And then NPA itself has categories. The category of NPA, for example, substandard asset, okay, 90 days to 1 year usually, and then the doubtful asset, and then the loss assets. Once you recognize any asset as loss asset, then you write them off at the end of year. But NPA is still in your balance sheet. Restructured assets are still in your balance sheet. This is not in the balance sheet. When we add up all of them, then we can get the true idea of how many loans were under trouble. That is the stressed assets. Okay, next term is externalities. Externalities is now increasingly being used because of the air pollution problem in India. What is externalities? Externality is any external effect on you or the economy, okay, which is happening because of the events which are not under our control. Okay. Cost or the benefit. It can also be a benefit. Cost or the benefit due to events beyond one's control. Okay. That is the easiest way, not the exact definition, but that is the easiest way to understand. So, for example, there is air pollution. I as an individual can't control it. Okay. And even as an economy, even as a society, we want to control it, it will take time. And there is a limit up to which how we can control it. Now, this is a lot of cost on society. Such cost is called external cost. External, and overall we call them externalities. Sometimes there can be positive externalities. For example, global warming can create positive externalities for some regions. For example, for the people of Greenland, let us say, there can be some positive externalities from global warming because some land is now becoming suitable for agriculture, for grazing of animals, okay, and anyways more livable. Not many people live in the northern part of the Greenland or the central part of the Greenland. Most people live in the coastal region in the southern Greenland. So in the coastal southern Greenland now, for these people, it is creating more livable condition. Okay, it is giving them more land for grazing. The ice cover is reducing. So for them, it is a positive externality. But for most other people, it is a negative externality. Climate change is beyond one's individual's control or one country's control. So it is a good example of externality. It is an external force which is either creating some benefit for us or profit for us. profit or loss for us. So in the case of an individual, there is a private cost, the cost which I am paying. There is a public cost, the cost to the society, and the difference between them is externality. Okay? Public cost is equal to private cost plus externality. For example, I'm smoking cigarette. I have purchased this cigarette for 10 rupees, let us say. I do not know how much they cost, but let us say it cost me 10 rupees. Now I'm smoking this cigarette of worth 10 rupees. My private cost for this cigarette is 10 rupees. But the social cost is much more. The social cost is, first of all, I'm harming my own health. Then I'm harming other people's health, those who are doing passive smoking because of me. So their healthcare cost that is there because of me, and my own healthcare cost which I'm doing in. So these are all particularly my impact on others, that is externality. Okay, so in my private cost, first of all, there is implicit cost and there is explicit cost. Explicit, which I exactly pay, which I am aware of, the 10 rupees I paid for the cigarette is the explicit cost. My own health loss is my implicit cost. And others, impact on others is the externality. My external impact or my impact on others. For others, it is an external factor which affected them. So, on myself, on my private self, there is implicit and explicit cost. And then there is externality which I am creating for others. If we put this all together up, then the actual public cost of the cigarette. That is why the cigarette's cost is very, very high. And we are increasing taxes on it regularly so as to reduce its consumption, to discourage it, and to bring private cost closer to the public cost. So that is something we are trying to do. I hope it is clear. The last term, cooperative and competitive federalism. And competitive federalism. For some students, it should be straightforward, but some students do have genuine difficulty in understanding it. So that's why I'm discussing it. This is a common doubt with many students, and it's frequently used in economic survey. So what exactly is competitive and cooperative federalism? Students have a doubt, sir. On the one hand, we are saying that there is competition, and then we say there is cooperation. How is it possible? So we need to understand, in the federalism, there is center and then there is state. Okay, center is on top, state below in the hierarchy. The point is, there is no state, there are states. These are multiple. So center is alone, but states are many, like this. Okay, now when we say cooperative federalism, we are talking about the vertical federalism. Vertical relation between, vertical is obviously the center and the state. Vertical is this line, horizontal is this line. So vertical relation, the vertical relation that is the between center and state, that should be cooperative. Center and state shall cooperate always on every matter. They should settle issues amicably. They should not get into conflict. Nobody should get into conflict by that way. So the vertical relation should be cooperative, whereas the horizontal relation between the states, there should be some competition. This competition will encourage. So horizontal relation, this should be competitive. Now, in order to encourage competitive federalism, Niti Aayog has started producing state-wise rankings everywhere. Energy consumption, poverty, women education, road construction, logistics index. Everywhere now we are providing states rank. Why we are providing states rank? Because we want to promote this states competition, this competitive federalism. So competitive federalism is between the states. We call it horizontal federalism. So horizontal competition and vertical cooperation. That is exactly what we mean by these terms. And Niti Aayog is promoting this term more and more. For the past few years, these terms have now been increasingly used and used. And we are promoting it. And it is a good thing that we are promoting it. So that was all about competitive and cooperative federalism. So we discussed all the 20 terms we wanted to. And I hope this explanation, this session has helped you to understand some of the basic terminology.